Grayhaven's miracles are perfect. Photographs go blank. A librarian follows a cedar-scented booth and its wooden scale. The next name it weighs could rewrite the town or erase her. The rain that spring fell like a quiet verdict, threading the lamp glass and softening the harbor until Grayhaven's edges resembled a photograph left too long in water. Nora Hale stood at the library counter, sleeves damp, sorting returned books with the small, relentless orderliness of someone who believed in facts as anchors. A cedar scent laced the air, unexpected and intimate, so precise it felt almost like a hand placed on her shoulder. A return to innocence yielded the thing. A postcard, its corner scalloped by rain and bearing a single sentence in a crisp, copperplate hand. "We can give you what you want most." Beneath the promise was a tiny printed phone booth, red as an old sin, and an address Nora could not place. No name signed it. Only the cedar that gathered in the fibers like a memory. She slid the card into a bottom drawer and closed it, as one closes windows against a draft, and tried not to let the words bruise her. That night, the town clock stilled at 11:11. Its chime arrested mid-bell, and by morning, the boardwalk had a new presence. A neat cedar booth with a single hanging sign, ledger, and a wooden scale that seemed too solemn for commerce. The man who tended it dressed like a stranger, meant to unsettle habit. He smiled with the economy of someone who knew what goods would sell. People began to return to one another as if the world had been loaned them back. Husbands walked home. Illnesses quieted. Disputes softened. The town carried a cedar trace wherever favors had been granted. Nora kept the postcard hidden, and upstairs under the watch of a faded family portrait, found the old photograph she had learned to live around. Her parents, and between them, a pale, blurred absence where a child should be. She traced the ghost space with a thumb and, for the first time since the card had fallen from a book, wondered whether some bargains were paid in names rather than coin. People who used the ledger reported miracles that arrived with the blunt, irrefutable clarity of a closed book. A husband appearing at a doorstep as if he'd misread the calendar, a missing finger that knitted into place, a job offer printed on paper that had not existed an hour before. Each return glittered like a coin in sunlight. But Nora, who read the town the way others read weather, began to notice the undersides. The returns came tethered to absences. Mrs. Ellery's husband had walked back into his house and kissed her knuckles. In the ledger of Grayhaven's life, however, his name was gone. Old family albums bore a blank where his laugh should have been. Municipal rosters and school registers offered only a tidy, impossible silence. In the bound volumes of the town newspaper, Nora found pages that had been gouged, names rubbed down until paper fibers wept. The marks were not the slow erasure of age but an intentional smoothing, like sandpaper on bone. She methodically cross-checked. Microfilm under the lamp, property rolls, baptism lists. Every miracle had the same cedar tang at its margins, a perfume that clung like a signature. A woman who had used the ledger to heal her son discovered she could no longer form his name. Her tongue stalled, the syllables falling into a dark, speechless gulf. When she turned the pages of an old album, a child's face had been removed so cleanly the paper seemed scorched. Nora cataloged entries in a private notebook, her handwriting small and relentless. The evidence multiplied into pattern. The ledger's gifts arrived instant and whole, and for each, something else was unmade. A cedar-scented arithmetic, she thought. The vendor's miracles, she now suspected with a cold, mounting certainty, were built on theft. Nora stepped into the booth, as if into a chapel, and the air closed behind her with the faint, sacred weight of cedar. The ledger lay on the table like a fossil open to the world, its pages not paper but thin, smoothed cedar, the grain of years visible as rings of consent. Beside it, a small wooden scale sat as if it had once measured gold. Now it ticked like a heart, tipping minutely whenever the vendor touched a page. He spoke in a polite, careful voice that made every sentence sound inevitable. "Balance," he said. "Every desire paid must be counterweighted. A life is sometimes measured in absence." His hands were tidy, as if erasing a name were the same thing as signing a receipt. Nora watched the scale tip, once, twice, at the ghost of his gesture. She thought of photographs that had smudged at the edge, of municipal minutes that healed themselves around a missing word. The vendor's explanation was euphemism and ledger. He described subtraction as charity, explained erasure as correction, and in his calm, the town's theft sounded administrative. She forced him to open the book. Beneath a faintly scored line, she found her own name, her signature a pale, hesitant scoring, and below it a space utterly rubbed white where another name had been removed whole, as though the world had been sanded to forget. Her breath lodged. The pages beneath her fingers were warm with cedar scent and accusation. Back in the stacks, cross-references made the pattern obscene. A town list of disappearances reaching back decades, each vanishing, dovetailing with a too-perfect fulfillment. Weddings mended, illnesses cured, debts resolved. At each site the same cedar lingered, a scent like an answering echo. Nora felt the ledger's arithmetic settle on her shoulders. Restoration purchased by retroactive unbeing, a balance kept in the currency of forgetting. The truth arrived like a smear on glass. Nora had learned to trust paper. It kept its promises. But the portrait in the Hale album bothered her with its impossibility. A child-shaped absence between her parents, an oval of washed-out paper where a face should have been, like sunlight burned through. She sat with the photo under the lamp until the blankness looked less like damage and more like intention. The cedar smell from the boardwalk lingered in the fibers, a varnish over a wound. Caleb March, who had kept the town's buried minutes with the patience of an undertaker, produced a brittle sheet from a folder stamped "Secret." Ink, 40 years old, trembled in a clerk's hand. The entry was small and precise, a plea to save a life, a promise to pay a balance at any cost. In the margin, a dutiful clerk had written, in shaking capitals, "Balance met. Name excised." The words sat like a judgment. When Nora pressed Armand for an answer, he did not hide behind rhetoric. He closed the cedar book and spoke as if naming a ledger's trade were only common sense. "The ledger doesn't conjure fulfillment," he said. "It trades existence. Desire must be paid for." He described the scale as if it weighed not coins, but lineage. The cedar scent only confirmed how methodically the town's satisfactions had been purchased. The realization unmoored her. Memory that had felt intimate. Her brother's tuneless whistle, the exact nick on his knee, retooled itself into evidence of subtraction. She saw then how Grayhaven's miraculous returns were double-edged. A reunited wife who could no longer account for the teacher she once knew. A cured child whose place in a yearbook had been sanded away. Their perfect returns were curses inflicted upon those stripped of antecedent. Lives rendered into rumor. Nora placed her palm against the blank space in the photograph and felt, for the first time, the ledger's arithmetic against her own skin, an answer that made her existence feel less like birth than like balance. The postcard arrived with the rain like a dare. Cedar smelled from its fibers as if someone had pressed a memory into paper. On its face, in the same neat, incised script, was one line. "Bring him back. Name the price." The vendor refused to name it until she declared what she wanted. He folded the answer into the ledger's logic. To stop the book, someone must become the subtraction. Only a person who saw through the ledger's gilded illusions could refuse and then unmake it, by giving their own unbeing in exchange for all that had been erased. Nora felt the truth of the ledger like a bruise. Her life, catalogued and tidy, had always held a blank that throbbed. Now that blank had a rumor of a brother's hand. The choice opened like a gulf: keep the town's comfortable lies, or erase herself to restore names, faces, histories. In the hush beneath the clock tower, 11:11, pendulum suspended, she signed. She stepped onto the scale, wood cool beneath her feet, cedar-scented pages whispering. The ledger took her consent like a priest taking confession. The town's perfect facades tore away with the soft violence of old wallpaper pulled from plaster. Photographs bled ink back into smiles. Blanked-out faces returned in a slow, photographic bloom. Registries uncurled their lies. Neighbors' tongues remembered names that had been strangers an hour before. The vendor inhaled once, a cedar sigh, and his outline thinned as if the ledger simply let him go. Nora's last lucid thought was the warmth of a small palm in hers, the instant certainty of a brother. Then a blankness like pressed linen. Grayhaven woke honest and grief-struck. Most would call her a rumor. A few kept her name like a prayer. Outside the library, a single cedar-scented postcard drifted into the rain, unread, unaddressed, and for a moment the town remembered how costly truth could be.